A lot of product marketing is about setting the right expectations. I don't want to sound pedantic. I'm not going to be a panel of one. It's just a presentation. I'm not going to be talking to myself from either side of the stage. But it's great to be here. Thanks everyone for being here, for taking time to sit through these presentations. Jamie Brighton, Director of Product Marketing for the Adobe Experience Cloud, specifically in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. My team, the way we define what we do, we think of ourselves as the voice of customer, the voice of the regional customer, but also the voice of the regional organization. Adobe, outside of the US, is very much focused on a field and marketing organization. The teams that are executing, that are selling product, they need support. We're their voice as well back into corporate HQ, into the corporate business. I jumped at the chance to speak at this event. I've been a member of the PMA for a couple of years. I guess I've sort of lurked on the Slack groups. I've definitely taken a lot of value from the conversations that have happened, the sharing of ideas and assets and resources. Many of my team are going through the core certification, which I think has got a lot of great value. But I thought it was a great opportunity to come and give you a bit of a perspective of how we do things at Adobe, and I guess some of the war stories or lessons that we've learned. Okay. So I think one of the things that stands out for me when you're doing, can people hear me still while I have my pack spot? Okay. I'm told I have a loud voice, is just the breadth of the role of product marketing, specifically at Adobe. I think if you do a course, certification, obviously the goal of the organization that's setting that is to try and cover as much of the different things, the different disciplines that product marketing can be involved with. And certainly I feel, as I look at how the role of product marketing at Adobe has evolved over the 10 years that I've been in product marketing, we do a lot. My team are involved in so many of the aspects. There we go, that's better. So many of the aspects that are covered in the certification, but the way in which we think about the balancing of priorities, the way in which we think about engaging with the stakeholders and delivering value to the organization, it changes on a day-to-day basis. Well, maybe not on a day-to-day, but certainly on a quarter-by-quarter basis. And it can be, I think, a challenge to find the right kind of frameworks and the right kind of engagement model for you and your organization. And I think that's particularly true at an organization like Adobe. So if you sit through the videos in the core certification, the way in which it's sort of played out to you is that you potentially have a lot of control over all aspects of product marketing within the organization that you're going to be working at. That's not true at an organization like Adobe, which is headquartered in the US, has international product marketing in various parts of the world, is mainly a field and marketing organization outside of the US. A lot of the decisions get made in the US, and we have to think about how we can effectively show up and influence the decisions that are being made when we don't always necessarily have complete control or authority over those decisions. For me, a lot of this is about what you do, but increasingly it's about how you do it. Next slide, please. Is there some sort? I wonder if there's like interference or something on the. Nope. So a lot of it's about what you do, but also it's about how you do it. Has anyone read How to Win Friends and Influence People? Yep, quite a few people. Nearly 100 years old. If you haven't, I encourage you to look at it. It's still in the top 20 bestsellers on Amazon. And a lot of the principles that are in that book are still relevant and very relevant for us and how we think about engaging with stakeholders internal stakeholders across the organization. Although, sometimes it can feel like we're alienating people. And I do encourage you not to watch the film, but certainly to think about reading the book by Toby Young about alienating people, because that's quite an interesting take. So, next slide, please. Who are Adobe, and why do I think that I sort of qualify to be on this stage talking to you about how we think about product marketing? Well, we are about, within the next week or so, to hit 40 years. We believe that's 40 years of innovation. If you're not familiar with Adobe, we're headquartered in San Jose. We're a software and services organization. We have evolved our go-to-market and the products that we sell over the last 40 years, quite dramatically. We employ 26,000 people around the globe, as I've already touched on a couple of times. What that looks like in terms of the way that the organization is set up and the profile of those people is very different in the US than it is in the regions and around the globe. And in the last 10 years particularly, we've been very acquisitive. So obviously we develop our own software. We're known very much so for things like Photoshop and Illustrator and the creative tools that we produce. But we have been very acquisitive in the field of customer experience management technology, digital marketing capabilities. Next slide, please. And our current strategy is around 3 clouds. So the Creative Cloud, those technologies I've been talking about, Document Cloud, the evolution of our electronic signature and document management capability, or Acrobat, if you like, and Experience Cloud, which my team is responsible for leading the go-to-market and product marketing efforts in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. It's a rapidly evolving space. We are still acquisitive in this area in order to get capabilities that we believe our customers want and that they're telling us they need. In recent years, we've bought commerce products like Magento, workflow management capabilities like Workfront, and we're adding all of those into the Experience Cloud offering. Obviously, part of that means that we're adding in experienced product marketing, product management teams from these organizations into the broader Adobe business under the banner of the Experience Cloud. And that can create complications, complexities in terms of how we integrate those teams, how we work with them, how we start to understand and prioritize the needs of those products against everything else that we've got going on with the Experience Cloud. So we launched the Experience Cloud as it's known today in 2012. For some reason, my Corp Comms team told me I'm not allowed to talk about the old names. You'll see some slides have been a little bit redacted as well as we go through. I thought I was doing the right thing and being a good corporate citizen. They made me remove some of the things. However, if anyone does want detail in some of the slides as I go through, and certainly in some of the templates, I'm very happy to share that with you in a kind of one-to-one environment. I was the first product marketer in EMEA 10 plus years ago, quickly followed by a colleague doing a very similar thing at the marketing cloud level based in Germany, part of a team in the US with a dotted line into the marketing organization in EMEA. In practice, based on personalities, time zones, and that kind of thing, that meant we were very much left to work things out for ourselves in the EMEA region. The first thing that we felt we needed was a common language or a common framework. Next slide, please. That worked that time. You should all hopefully be familiar with this. This is the PMA core framework. And we've definitely found that there are elements of this that are particularly relevant for how we think about how we execute and the models that we need within the product marketing organization. There are lots to choose from, though. Everyone familiar with the pragmatic marketing model? You can pick and choose the bits that are relevant for you. I certainly feel that having done some of the pragmatic training, and with all due respect to pragmatic, if there's anyone in the room from that organization, certainly things like PMA, they tend to have a much more modern approach to product marketing, much more inclusive of things like storytelling and other elements where the sort of more traditional models like pragmatic marketing tend to be more business focused. What we've found is that some elements are more important than others. And we found that not one framework covered everything that we needed. You may not, I don't think we've actually got it called out on here. This is the old Sirius Decisions, now Forrester Decisions model, focused on portfolio marketing. And this is one that we have kind of gravitated to in the last few years, one that we feel, I guess, most accurately reflects, with some customization, the way in which product marketing within the region tends to think about the world. And this is certainly where we've drawn a lot of influence as we've defined the charter that we use to sort of define how we execute and what our stakeholders within the business can expect to get from us and our organization. And it's resonated really well with the business. So the first thing I want to cover is having a charter. And this is something that we have only fairly recently documented and kind of codified, if you like. But this sets out things like my introduction. We are the regional voice of the customer, both internal and external customer. And it sets out the sorts of things that stakeholders within the organization can expect to get from us, should expect to come to us to receive on a cyclical basis throughout the year. And a lot of the way that we work at Adobe is we're a quarterly driven public company. A lot of the way that we work is based on the cycles of the year, the annual cycles, the quarterly cycles. And I think it's really important that stakeholders can have that expectation of what they're going to get from you and your team at any point in the year. So, we own regional product strategy. We localize messaging. We are the voice of the internal and external customer. We seek to improve time to market. I mean, none of this is rocket science, but it's good for us to have this documented, to have it on a slide that we can share. And this is one of the kind of the key things. Once we created this document, we use this at every opportunity with our internal stakeholders, with management, to remind them of the sorts of things that we're involved with, and to report success against these items. Now, you can see, if you were looking carefully or you're familiar with the Forrester decisioning matrix that I showed you, a lot of these columns across the top are lifted directly from that, because we felt that those things identified the kind of categories or areas that we're particularly focused on. As I said, clearly we do, every one of these boxes is actually filled in the proper document. Don't think that we're being lazy and we only have 3 or 4 things that we're doing. But I was asked to remove some of the specific things that we do. But I'd certainly be happy to share that, as I say, in a more one-to-one environment. But we identify international market opportunities. One of the things that came out in Catherine's survey was looking at product marketing to provide that strategic direction, understanding where the new market opportunities are. And that for us is particularly important as we see some of the macroeconomic factors that are affecting our business are very different in Europe, Middle East, and Africa than they are in the US at the moment, and we predict that to be the case in the next few years. We regionalize the global buyer profiles and ICPs, and these are all things that you'd expect, but you don't always necessarily get these directly from your corporate product marketing team when you're in this decentralized sort of methodology or approach. And if you do, they may not be directly relevant for your particular sales teams or your particular market. The other thing that we do is we publish a kind of calendar. So this has lots of uses for me and for the team and for the organization. It helps the business to visualize when we're going to be busy and the things that we're going to be providing to them. It helps my team at a fundamental level. It helps my team to plan their year and understand when are they going to have those high points in terms of the things that they've got to execute, whereas some of the business as usual things. It helps us with capacity planning, and it helps to sort of understand the expectations on the team in terms of that kind of output. And I think that's really important. We use the charter to define what the stakeholders can expect. And one of those groups, one of our stakeholders, is obviously our global product marketing colleagues. For each product in the Adobe Experience Cloud, and you'll be thankful that I saved you from the full architecture diagram, which lists out all of the products, which is typically part of one of my presentations. For each one of those products, and there are about 13 in the overall offering, there's a group of product marketers in the US, typically in the US, although some of the companies that we've acquired have been global companies in Europe and the Far East. And then there's a corresponding group on my team who they are interfacing with, who run the go-to-market and product marketing for those particular products. So the charter is also something that we can use to show the additional value that we could provide. If we had the right resources, if we have the support from the US, what are the things that we should be focused on in the regional markets that could add a lot of value to the organization? And a good example of that is the regional go-to-market. So, I hope that many of you have a process where you're thinking about documenting the go-to-market strategy for your products. As I put these slides together, it was quite difficult to kind of have a balance of the generalized flow or process diagrams versus just showing you slides from the documents that we're using on a day-to-day basis. Not sure which is most useful. These are the categories or the areas that we have found provide value, resonate with the stakeholders. We don't own all of these. Things like partner strategy, EMEA marketing strategy, we're working with colleagues and we have expectation that they will co-own those parts of this document. but on an annual, actually on a biannual basis, we're creating this for the coming year. We're updating it as we go through the year. This may be useful to you. This is how my team think about the exec summary for each of their products, and this is certainly something that you can tell has hit the redaction part of the Corp Comms team. We set the targets. We have our region in EMEA is split up, or our geo in EMEA is split up into multiple regions. We're looking at the balance of where we expect that business to come from. We're looking at, we do our own internal segmentation of our customer base. We're looking at the balance there. We're also thinking about what's the balance between selling new product, upselling existing customers, and we have the concept of cross-selling when we want to sell to an existing customer one of the other products, those other 13 products that they don't already have. Again, all common terminology, I'm sure, but we're looking at the balance and how that's going to affect our overall strategic focus. And then we're documenting that, and we're using this to understand how we're performing and do course correction as we go through the year. So the go-to-market document has proved invaluable. We sometimes fail to get the support that we need from other parts of the organization. I didn't want this to be too negative. Adobe is a great place to work. I'm surprised Corp Comms didn't tell me to stick up the employee survey kind of great places to work thing. It's not all negative, but sometimes we struggle to get the support that we need from some of the stakeholders within the kind of the matrix. And one particular example that I felt was quite painful to hear was when we create these go-to-market strategy documents, some of the team found that their corporate product marketing colleagues were even questioning the value of having this document and why we even needed to produce it. And, part of the reason for producing it was because there was a gap and we weren't getting the support and we weren't getting them to produce it for their particular product at a global level, let alone at a European level. So it's critical that you have the right kind of collaboration model. And these sorts of things can be addressed by making sure that you are collaborating in the right way and that people understand your charter and what your goals are. And again, none of this is rocket science, but it can be very useful to actually just take the time to document what works. So where we have pockets of goodness, great ideas, great ways in which teams are collaborating, we document that. We understand through that documentation of the process what works and what can we repeat across products. If you can imagine, it's not quite the case that we have 13 different product marketing groups with different approaches, but there are a number of different groups across the product set that we have. They're thinking about things in slightly different ways because everybody's human, and we need to try and replicate the things that are working. That then means that we do the basics. And again, slightly redacted, from a global product marketing point of view, weekly team meetings. One of our first hurdles was getting colleagues in the US to put their weekly team meetings at a time that didn't mean that we had to stay up until 10 o'clock at night. Basics, I know, you would think that you wouldn't have to cover that in this day and age, but it's still the case that you have to just remind people of the different time zones. And don't get me started on trying to get someone in APAC into a meeting with a European and US audience. So we do that because we can map the ways in which they work, and then we can put that across to other parts of the organization to get their buy-in. And an example of where this has been really effective. So win-loss. We love win-loss at Adobe, but we love and hate win-loss because the information that you can get, the insights that you can get is incredible. The process of doing win-loss is a pain in the backside. Quite frankly, I don't know how many people feel that. CRM, Salesforce hygiene, is never quite what it could be. You'd love to do it programmatically, but actually it becomes, if I want to do this, I've got to send 180 emails, and then I've got to chase the reps, and then I'm at the end of the quarter, and they've just ignored it, and they've got something else that's more important, and then I feel like they're doing me a real personal favor, even though I'm going to provide them with lots of insights. If they could just spend 30 seconds to tell me the information, it becomes a challenge. But what we can do in this case is to sort of divide and conquer. So our US team are lucky enough to use an external agency to get insights directly from the customer. Where we have the relationship is with the field team, with the sales team. And we can combine the output of what they do in the US with what we can do in the European region to get both the voice of the buyer, the voice of the sales team, and then to go deeper where we see that there's real value. And this is an example, again, heavily redacted, I apologize. But by getting the insights from those win-loss interviews in detail, we can then start to really play this back to the team, which is a virtuous circle, obviously, because if we can start to show deal deconstruction information that they can really use in their next deal cycle, then they start to give us the information that we need. So this gives us a way of visualizing why the customer did or didn't buy the product, and things like the timeline. What were those touch points? It might sound basic to you, but one of the things that we found is the buyer has evolved quite dramatically even in the last few years. Adobe has a real heritage in marketing, and we are good at selling our products to marketing. But increasingly, the IT center, the CIO is involved, and we need to make sure that we understand the needs of that group, where they interact, how they want to consume information, and how that's different from what we're good at doing when it comes to marketing. And this type of activity really, really helps us with that. So this has enabled us to kind of go deep, if you like, on how we collaborate. And the example with our competitive center of excellence has been great. But it's not always the case that it's that easy to work with teams. And influence, a theme that comes out in how to win friends and influence people, is kind of critical. One of the fascinating things for me of where we sit within the organization, and I believe where product marketing sits in general, is that we have a view across so many different factors, so many different groups and teams, where they may sit in their silos in a region or in a particular function, and they don't necessarily, because they don't always need to, they don't necessarily try and understand the bigger picture. And sometimes, again, Adobe's a great place to work. Sometimes it can be like watching a slow-motion car crash, because you can see these things happening that should change, but you don't necessarily have the authority to make those changes. And this is where this kind of concept of influence comes in. So this was a difficult one for me to kind of visualize or show you. This is a deliberately blurry, Corp Comms didn't even have to tell me to do this. This is a deliberately blurry but real stakeholder map of all of the people that me and my team engage with on a fairly regular basis across the Adobe organization. You can tell that it's complex, and this is by no means exhaustive. But what we wanted to do is actually understand, okay, we don't have direct authority. How can we really influence these people? We work with an organization called Telios Consulting. This was a few years ago. The site didn't work, so I'm hoping that they don't mind me showing some of this information. They have a great course which is focused on this concept of influence without authority. And again, I'm rapidly running out of time. I don't have much time to go into do justice what is a multi-day workshop on influence without authority, but suffice to say, there are multiple ways that you can approach this. You can try and have power over people, or you can try and have power with. And one is about coercing someone to do what you want, and the other is about getting them to collaborate with you and to commit to a joint set of goals. And you can imagine what the output of that workshop is, and where the Telios Consulting are expecting you to kind of go with this. And this was highlighted for us in roadmap, product roadmap. So one of the challenges we have is how we get things that we know are important to European customers or Europe, Middle East, and Africa customers onto the roadmap when we're competing with all of the things that are going on in the US. The deal sizes are often larger, and it only takes a couple of big deals in the US to completely obliterate the 10 customers potentially that might be wanting to buy the product over here. One of the first major things, was that we just weren't showing up in a joined-up way. This slide is an eye chart. Again, this is one I'd love to kind of visualize in a more, process flow kind of way. But essentially, there are lots of different parts of the organization within EMEA who want to talk to product in the US and tell them all of the things that are wrong or right with the product. And that just creates a lot of noise. Product management and engineering resource are limited. No matter how many people you've got in your organization, there's only so many hours in the day and so many people who could build your product for you. So getting people together, and we call this the Solution Leadership Board. This is passionate representatives from things like solution consulting, technical pre-sales, if you call it in a different name, sales, from the customer success organization, et cetera, people who really care about the product. This may not be their day job, but it's a sort of stretch assignment, but they show that passion and they want to share what they're hearing from their customers and from their engagements. And by putting that together, having regular meetings, and then getting buy-in from colleagues in the US that they will accept the outputs from this part of the organization, we show up in a much better way. We are able, through a sort of combined show of force, to really emphasize the importance of the issues that we're raising, and understand as well, in return, how that sits against the priorities that the teams may have from a global point of view. So I've run out of time, which is definitely on me, and it's slightly ironic that the section I was just about to go into is the power of presentation. I was going to show you a short video of some work we did with a company called The Talking Trade, which starts with the 6 sins of presenting, which I'm sure the coach would certainly have me haul me over the coals for. But the point here was really about making sure that you take time on how you deliver the message. We could have the best case for getting something onto the roadmap from a global point of view. If we don't present that in the right way, if the slides are terrible, if the way in which we deliver the message to our colleagues in the US is wrong, then that can have a massive negative impact on how the message is received and how the information is received. So there are resources, things like Slide Model, I encourage you to use. We're lucky enough to be able to use an agency that helps us with a lot of the slides that we use. And there are lots of resources on things like LinkedIn Learning, Harvard Managed Mentor, around the delivery of great material. One thing I would encourage you to do, and hopefully I can skip over the video, during lockdown, I did an improv course, an online improv course, and I forced some of my team to go through a kind of an improv workshop. I would highly encourage you to do this. This is something called PowerPoint Roulette, where you get the topic and then you just get some random pictures and you have to give a presentation based on that topic. It's amazing how it gets you out of your comfort zone. But trust me, I wasn't doing that today. If any wags in the audience think that was what I was approaching. This was this guy down here talking about the global housing market, which is a slightly more upbeat topic at the time when we did this presentation. And you can see some of the reactions from people, but it really gets you thinking about how you deliver a great message. I really can't remember what the link was to that, but clearly this guy thought it was really funny. So, in summary, find a framework and engagement model that works for you. Build a charter, publish that charter, believe in that charter, use it wherever you can. Don't feel afraid to open that deck up and present it to people. I have certainly been guilty of that, feeling like, I'm not sure that I should really get my the charter that tells people what I'm doing up in this particular meeting and repeat it. You cannot repeat this information enough to people if you fully believe in that charter. If something doesn't exist and you believe it should within the organization, and you believe it's strongly enough, then build it, develop it, use it, and force your stakeholders to take notice. Don't force them to use it, because it'll always sit in their inbox. But if you can show them that you've delivered value to the organization by doing it, then they will be more likely to buy into that. And that was, my example there was the go-to-market strategy documents that we did not have for our particular region at the time. Look for patterns of goodness in collaboration, repeat them. Take time to understand other people's motivations. So have empathy. When I started out my career, when someone didn't do what I thought they should be doing, that was because they were clearly trying to sabotage me and didn't have the same goals as me. I have got a bit older and a bit more mature, only slightly more mature. Some of my team are there, so they'll vouch for that. If I believe fundamentally that my company hires good people, they are not going to be doing things because they want to sabotage me. There are probably lots of other competing reasons why they can't necessarily see eye to eye with me on a particular topic. So disagree and commit, I suppose, to use a cliche. Develop the tools you need to exert influence, even if you don't necessarily have that authority. You're unlikely to always have the authority that you need. And make sure that you spend time working on communication and the way that you deliver your messages. That's critical. I guess the unwritten one here is just try and have fun doing it as well. With that, I'll say thank you very much indeed for taking time with me this morning, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.
That was awesome. Do you want to stay and we'll do a few questions?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Can we give one more round of applause? That was awesome, Jamie. Yeah.
Thank you.
Super informative.
I'm looking at my watch now. I feel like I was sabotaged by the guys at the back. I hope I haven't rushed through that for no reason.
We have a formal permission from Miss Beth, the queen of the show.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, let's do maybe 3 questions. This one was upvoted. I feel like we should do the hygiene thing. Beth, do people get a copy of slides from Yeah, okay. So, take photos, but don't stress out. You'll get slides afterwards. Okay, we had some Adobe-specific ones that were at the top, so I'm just going to skip to that. Okay, Adobe embraced product marketing very early on compared to other tech businesses. What do you think Adobe saw in PMMs that other organizations have not?
Yeah, interesting. I'm not sure that I agree with that, to be totally honest. I mean, I didn't give you my full history. I've been at Adobe for 16 years. I started out in solution consulting. I could do a whole presentation, as you can probably gather, on history of and good kind of resources and routes to becoming a product marketer. I feel like if you're in technical pre-sales, that's a great starting place, given all of the kind of skills that you need. I feel like we were a bit late to the game in international product marketing.
Right.
I was quite surprised that Corp Comms didn't sort of cross through all the stuff about in 2012. We invested in product marketing, but until that point, the management team were very clear about the fact that they wanted control over product management and product marketing, and for it to all come out of the US. They actively discouraged people from doing shadow product marketing organizations and that kind of thing, which I'm sure we've seen. But I mean, I think I'm trying to remember the specifics of the question.
What did Adobe figure out about product marketing?
Well, I mean, I guess the fact that we're still here 10 years on, we're showing some value to the business. I think particularly from an international point of view, my colleagues in the US, they're brilliant. To come back to my point around, we don't always see eye to eye. They're fantastic, but they've got a massive job to do with the product. And even if you just focused on the North American market, that's a crazy percentage of our overall business, which brings with it challenges of how you prioritize. And obviously, I think if you're in the US, and with all apologies if this is not necessarily the case, but certainly from an Adobe point of view, it can just look really complicated to do anything outside of the US. It's a relatively homogenous market. You don't have to worry about languages. One of the greatest days for me in my product marketing career was when a colleague who ran one of the lines of business in the US told me that, of course, what's different about Europe is that everyone speaks different languages over there. I wasn't sure whether I'd it landed, the messaging had landed, or what, or whether he was just having a laugh with me at the time. But we have and continue to focus on the kind of the visible value. We have to do that. How do we provide value back to the organization? And sometimes you can make a noise about it, but you also have to have faith that the things that you're doing are actually having an impact, and people continue to invest.
Definitely, that makes a lot of sense. Let's do one more question. The top one is actually, do you know much about the Figma acquisition, or share a little bit more about that?
So I've spoken so much about Corp Comms, I can just plead the kind of Corp Comms said I couldn't talk about it kind of thing. Particularly, Figma actually sits on the other side of the business. So Figma is an acquisition that was done by our digital media organization, the Creative Cloud business. It sits alongside the existing product capabilities like Adobe XD for prototyping. That's not part of the go-to-market for the Experience Cloud. Obviously, there are integrations. You want to prototype an app and then put analytics onto the app or put it into your content management platform. There will be really strong integrations, but specifically the integration of Figma is not something that I can talk about. I could talk about how we integrate other customer experience management tech. Obviously, there's process that those organizations have to adopt. It's unlikely that they're going to be using the Sirius Decisions, Forrester Decisions, I can't stop saying that for some reason, model straight away. They're going to have the delineation, the way in which they divide up the different types of ownership within the product is going to be different. Resourcing is probably going to be different. These are things that have to be handled delicately and over a period of time. It's not something that we just do we've done enough acquisitions to know that you can't just do a short, sharp change and expect it to land well.
Right.
And a lot of the companies that we buy, the people will stand up in front of the CEO and say, what are you going to do with my product? I bleed, whatever the color is. When we bought Magento, I distinctly remember Shantanu Narayan, our CEO, coming to one of the events that we did in Barcelona, and the development team were based out in Spain, and one of the ladies stood up and said, I'm very nervous about what you're doing with our product. I bleed orange, which was the Magento color. So that's a fairly heavy burden to take on.
Okay, great insights. There's a ton of questions here. I'd encourage everyone not to put pressure on you, but to come find Jamie during your breaks.
Yeah.
And maybe you can even take a look through the Slido questions.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I didn't put my contact details. I mean, I'm fairly easy to find on LinkedIn if anyone wants to connect. I'd love to. The point about, there was a lot more detail behind these slides. I'd be very happy to share those with you in a slightly less mass situation. So if anyone is interested in talking about that, then I'm very happy to do that.
Or you can also join our Slack channel, and if you want to live respond, then we can share knowledge that way too. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much,
Jamie.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay.